Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. It's good to be with you here on this Thursday, June 4th. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. SpaceX is once again within 1 hour from attempting to launch its Falcon 9 rocket from Space Launch Complex 40. If this feels like deja vu, we were here just yesterday morning as the weather was stymieing an opportunity for launch from this pad with these satellites. But thankfully, it's a new day and a new forecast, a much better outlook for SpaceX and its aspiration to send these 29 Starlink V2 optimized satellites up into low Earth orbit. Time of departure currently set for 5:53 a.m. Eastern, 09:53 UTC for those around the world. Just about 57.5 minutes remaining on the clock, and SpaceX is about 20 minutes away from making the call on the start of prop load. Appreciate you all for being with us here this morning as we're getting started on our live coverage. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. We're joined this morning by our moderators, M. Teresa and Jules, back again. Appreciate the both of you for being with us this morning. And you can help make the mods' job that much easier just by following our live chat rules. Just post your message in English so that the mods can respond as appropriate. We also ask that you hold off from delving into topics of overt politics or religion, and please do not use all caps. Emojis are perfectly fine. We would just ask that you not use a large chunk of them so it takes up a big percentage of the live chat space. And last but certainly not least, we'd ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. We'll all get along swimmingly. We're also joined in the chat space this morning by one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, who's able to help answer folks' questions in the chat. Speaking of channel members, this and every other live launch opportunity are made possible in no small part thanks to our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So big thanks to folks like Mark P., William Funk, Jean Marquis, Rita Loy, and many, many others. Virginia Ramirez, good morning to you. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spacelightnow.com, access to our member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server. As we're getting the broadcast up and running here, I want to thank our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, who's running the technical operations of the broadcast today. And of course, if you're not already following our merry band of photographers, you certainly should. And you can find them at their handles here on X. John is at Space Coast Cron. Adam is at Aburn NYC. Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. And promised by the next Cape launch, we'll have Cameron Schwartz up here as well. Also, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. You can find us most places just by searching for that. We are on Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook for those of you who are not on X. Falcon 9 first stage booster set to fly this mission has the tail number of B1090 in the SpaceX fleet. It will be launching for its 12th flight. So not one of our Falcon 9 frequent flyers, the most flown boosters by SpaceX. Here's a list of the most flown, the top 5, with the 5th place spot still a two-way tie between B1077 and B1078. As our T-minus 52 minutes, 6 seconds and counting, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown here, what is still out in front of SpaceX before they are ready to start flying these Starlink satellites into orbit. As mentioned, at around T-minus 38 minutes is when the SpaceX launch director will make the call on the start of prop load today. Once the go-ahead is given, fueling will begin at T-minus 35 minutes with a loading of RP-1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen will begin flowing on board the Falcon 9's first stage. Half an hour before liftoff is when SpaceX starts to load cryogenic helium on board the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage, and they'll do the same for the second stage a few minutes after that. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. At around T-minus 23 minutes, second stage RP-1 loading will wrap up. At T-minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is the start of the strong back chill down. At this point in the count, SpaceX will be thermally conditioning the feed lines at the pad prior to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. We'll see this visually as the big vent, which here at pad 40 starts at about T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds, lasting roughly 4 minutes in duration, and setting the stage for the LOX to flow on board the upper stage at around T-minus 16 minutes. Moving right along in the count at T-minus 7 minutes is the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines. SpaceX will flow a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helping to protect those engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage at startup. About 6 minutes prior to liftoff, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. At T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the retraction of the strong back away from the Falcon 9 rocket. First, the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, that will recline about 2 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, stays in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it pulls back in a much more rapid fashion, clearing the way for the vertical climb of this Falcon 9. At the 3-minute mark before liftoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank should be full. Same will be true on the second stage, about a minute after that. At this point in the count, the Falcon 9 rocket will be fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is entering into its automated startup sequence. Control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and at the same time, the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will then confirm their status of being go for launch, if that is in fact the case. That happens at T-minus 45 seconds. That'll be followed by the engine ignition command, triggering at T-minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for that T0 liftoff. Once again this morning, targeting that departure time at 5:53 a.m. Eastern, 09:53 UTC for those around the world, or now T-minus 48 minutes and 5 seconds. Time currently T-minus 46 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. On board today's Falcon 9 rocket are a series of 29 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites manufactured in Redmond, Washington, which is near Seattle. This manufacturing compilation put together by SpaceX and shared during a Starship launch gives you a sense of what the manufacturing process is for these satellites. This mission today is set to be the 52nd dedicated flight to the Starlink fleet. That's out of what will be 64 Falcon 9 rockets launched across 2026 so far. SpaceX began launching V2 Mini optimized satellites within about the last year or so, a little bit more than that. This is, by our count, the 297th launch of Starlink V2 Mini satellites. Now, these optimized versions of the V2 Minis are considerably lighter than their predecessors, now weighing about 575 kilograms, previously about 800 kilograms. With their solar panels fully extended, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters tip to tip. They use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. These particular satellites that are flying today are set to be deployed at about 165 miles or roughly 266 kilometers in altitude at a roughly 53-degree inclination. The Falcon 9 rocket, upon departing Florida, will head off on a northeasterly trajectory along the east coast of the United States. If visibility is good in your neck of the woods, given the launch time, should be potentially quite a pretty launch, as it's coming around half an hour prior to sunrise. So there certainly is a chance for a nice jellyfish effect this morning. We will wait and see how conditions actually play out this morning. Sunrise here at the Cape is going to be about 6:25 a.m. this morning. Again, T0 liftoff is 5:53 a.m. Eastern, 09:53 UTC. You could see a glimpse of it in the video I showed you earlier, but here's another view of what the deployment of the Starlink satellites will look like on this mission. SpaceX releases them all as one stack, and then they slowly drift apart, extend their solar panels to begin charging their batteries, and then start their movement up to their operating orbital position. As you can see in the reflection from one of those Starlink satellites, there are a couple of rods that hold the stack together and affixed to the second stage of the Falcon 9 rocket. And unlike back in the older iterations of the Starlink constellation, where there would be a release pin that would also float off away from the upper stage of the Falcon 9 and then eventually re-enter the atmosphere and burn up, having the mechanism fold back into the Falcon 9 upper stage itself allows it to stay as one piece, and then when SpaceX performs the deorbit burn, it will drive it back into the atmosphere all as one piece to burn up and reduce the risk of space debris on this mission. Question in the chat asking, pardon me, if any satellite has been destroyed by orbital debris. Certainly there has been some damage to at least one Starlink satellite from an apparent debris strike. Now, whether it was a micrometeoroid or some other piece of space debris, I don't recall off the top of my head, but and we do have a hold here. We'll return to that conversation here in just a moment. SpaceX reassessing the T0 here. We will let you know what has been decided as soon as we know it. And we do have a new T0 for you. It is 6:01 and 50 seconds. We've adjusted our countdown clock, as you can see. SpaceX now back at T-minus 47 minutes, 35 seconds, and counting. SpaceX does have a roughly 4-hour long window for this launch today, as they did yesterday. Currently in the middle of that, the window opened up at 4 a.m. this morning. So eating about 2 hours of the launch window so far. For those of you just joining us, again, SpaceX has adjusted the T0 liftoff time for the Falcon 9 launch this morning. We're sitting just now under 42 minutes away from the new planned liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket, which is set to depart from Space Launch Complex 40 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station at 6:01 a.m. and 50 seconds. 50 seconds a.m. Eastern. 10:01:50 UTC for those around the world. Assuming SpaceX sticks with this new T0, they should be making the call on the startup prop load within the next couple of minutes, and then tanking will kick off at T-minus 35 minutes. Time now T-minus 38 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Saw a couple folks in the live chat saying that they were hoping to see more night launches over at Vandenberg, since the most recent string of them have been during the morning time. Well, apparently ask and you shall receive. Currently, the next scheduled launch over at Vandenberg is right now set for the evening of June 6th. Now, it's not going to be a true dark night launch, but at least at the opening of the window, they're looking for a liftoff at a window that opens up at 7 p.m. Pacific. So, trending towards the evening. And we do have another hold in this launch countdown. Standing by for a new T0. And our new T0 liftoff time is now 6:26 and 30 seconds a.m. Eastern, 10:26:30 UTC. We've adjusted our clock. Now back to T-minus 1 hour, 1 minute, 33 seconds and counting. Given that the weather looks pretty ideal for this launch opportunity, it's unclear if SpaceX may be working an issue at this point, or if there's a COLA, or they're making adjustments to maneuver around potential conjunction in low Earth orbit, or a conflict with another object in orbit. And as one of our channel members, Marco Gennari, points out in the live chat, yes, because they have not begun fueling their Falcon 9 rocket at this point in the count, a hold is very much not a scrub at this point in time. SpaceX has a 4-hour window, and as long as they've not begun fueling, they can continue to push back further and further into the window for whatever reason they deem necessary, as long as they clear that with the eastern range and get approval for the new T0.
advisories in effect for KSC at this time.
For those who may just be joining recently, we are watching the countdown of SpaceX and their Falcon 9 rocket at Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. The company has made a couple of moves to the right as far as the T0 liftoff time for this mission. Currently, things are progressing towards a liftoff just a hair past sunrise now at 6:26 and 30 seconds a.m. Eastern. 10:26:30 UTC for our audience joining around the world. As you can see in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, time currently T-minus 51 minutes, 13 seconds, and counting. SpaceX has not begun fueling its Falcon 9 rocket yet at the pad, and until they start that process, they can continue to make adjustments to the T0 within this launch window. We will keep a close eye on that to see if there are any further adjustments to the launch time. We're just about 20 minutes now away from the previously advertised T0 when we started the broadcast this morning, which was, of course, 5:53 a.m. Time currently T-minus 45 minutes, 17 seconds and counting. Seeing the start of a very lovely sunrise here on Florida's Space Coast, kicking off Thursday, June 4th. SpaceX is roughly 7 minutes or so away from making the call on the start of prop load. We've seen them adjust the T0 liftoff time now a couple of times since we began our broadcast, so we will keep a weather eye out for any further adjustments to the launch time. But if the T0 at present stays as is, we'll see the team start to load RP1, the fuel for the Falcon 9 rocket, on the first and second stages, and liquid oxygen on board the first stage. That'll happen now in a little more than 9 minutes if the timeline holds. And as we're waiting for good news from SpaceX, we've got some good news here in the chat. Our thanks to channel member Rita Loy for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that generosity, Rita. Thanks for growing our community here on YouTube. And to our 5 newest gifted members, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Rita in the live chat if you haven't already. And we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. Time now T-minus 42 minutes, 19 seconds and counting. Channel member Virginia Ramirez marking 6 months with us as a channel member at the pad leader level. Glad to have you with us now for half a year strong. Also, thank you for the $5 super chat. We appreciate the additional support this morning. Also, thanks to channel member Michael McRory for a $10 super chat. Thank you so much for your support this morning, Michael, and for being a channel member with us. And for those of you who are watching live and want to be a part of the show, you can always use, as we've just been discussing, the YouTube Super Chat feature to have your comment or question elevated for a potential discussion. If you have a comment or query that you'd like to have be part of the broadcast, and, of course, if it's appropriate to be read aloud as part of our show. Also, if you're watching this in a replay format and not live with us this morning, you can always go over to our website, spaceflightnow.com/donate. If you'd like to help support our independent coverage of NASA and the broader space industry. There you can find a description of how we use the funds to support our journalistic endeavors here in Florida and beyond. In fact, we are going to be hitting the road once again coming up in less than a week. In fact, just a handful of days from now, be heading over to Houston, Texas, back again at the Johnson Space Center, as we were throughout about half of the month of April in covering the Artemis 2 mission. We'll be back there this time for Artemis 3, as on Tuesday morning we will learn the names and meet the crew of the Artemis 3 mission, which is currently NASA is aiming to fly that in mid-2027. And hopefully we'll be getting some more details about the full scope of that mission. NASA has broadly stated the aspiration of having Orion perform a rendezvous and docking with one or potentially both of the human landing system landers, that being SpaceX's Starship and Blue Origin's Blue Moon Mark II crew lander. Of course, there are a number of questions surrounding where things stand with both of those landers. We've seen some renderings of what the internal crew habitation portion of the HLS version of Starship will look like, and a couple of close-up photos and training mock-ups, but we've not gotten a lot of color on that so far. And of course, SpaceX still has yet to launch a Starship into orbit. Given how Flight 12 played out, it is unlikely, although you never say never, but unlikely that we'll see Flight 13 be an orbital launch of Starship. Team's currently working through SpaceX-led FAA oversight mishap investigation following the off-nominal performance of the Super Heavy booster on that mission. And of course, with the unfortunate explosion of Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket back at Launch Complex 36 1 week ago this evening, Blue Origin is very much in the reevaluation and rebuilding phase, working to get a root cause on what happened to their rocket, and then work to rebuild that launch pad. Right now, the only site they've got to launch the New Glenn rocket, though they have been working on an adjacent pad at Launch Complex 36. And CEO Dave Limp did note that they are working on what he described as vertical con-up. There have been some documentation in a variety of places to showcase that work has been going on since at least mid-2025 in an effort to get vertical integration and refurbishment facilities in their early stages to come online at the Cape for Blue Origin. So we'll see how quickly they can rebound and rebuild, and get to flight, and what the status of both of the HLS providers will mean for the timing and the scope of the mission for Artemis 3 will look like. Again, we'll be at the Johnson Space Center on Tuesday, bringing you all the details here on YouTube and on our website, spaceflightnow.com, and on our social channels as well. For now, though, we're currently T-minus 36 minutes, 45 seconds, and counting to what is hopefully will remain the T0 liftoff time for this Falcon 9 rocket out at Space Launch Complex 40. Keeping a close eye on the clock to see if there are any further adjustments to the T0, but the clock at this moment in time still ticking down, suggesting that fueling is set to begin now in just a little more than 1 minute. Clock still moving forward, now under 35 minutes remaining. Give this another 30 seconds just to make sure there isn't a bounce back, but assuming everything is correct as it appears, SpaceX should now be fueling its Falcon 9 rocket at the pad. We'll be watching in the next few minutes for visual evidence of this, as SpaceX has long since ceased the practice of announcing the start of fueling for its Falcon 9 rockets when it comes to its Starlink satellites. As we're watching for signs of tanking, which should become evident within the next minute and a half to 2 minutes, we'll be watching the base of the Falcon 9 first stage booster, tail number B1090. Just above the tree line, we'll be checking out for signs of frost line building up there as the super cold densified liquid oxygen begins to flow on board the first stage. Given the difference in temperature between the significantly warmer and more humid Florida air and the much colder LOX, you'll also be able to see some vapor in that region of the rocket. And it does appear as though we've got a frost line forming here, which would confirm that SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, pressing forward towards a launch attempt at 6:26 and 30 seconds a.m. Eastern, 10:26:30 UTC. That is just about 1 minute past sunrise. If you're just joining us now, you're watching Spaceflight Now's live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This is Starlink 10-43, the launch of 29 Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites heading up into low Earth orbit. Sunrise is nearly upon us here on the Space Coast, as is the launch, which should happen right about at the same time. Liftoff at 6:26 and 30 seconds a.m. Eastern. 10:26:30 UTC is just about a minute past the time that sunrise will happen here at Cape Canaveral. So it should be a really nice liftoff to begin this flight of Falcon 9 rocket. This particular booster with the tail number 1090 is flying for its 12th time today, having first flown back in December of 2024. A little bit of a breeze at the Kennedy Space Center press site, but thankfully no weather alerts or issues in place. Meteorologists coming into this launch opportunity with a 95% favorable outlook. Did want to address one of the questions that was in our chat, coming from Comfortable Cavern, who says, Theo, parentheses age 12, what are the satellites for? Will the rocket do the cool landing? Take those questions in the order in which they came. The satellites are Starlink, specifically SpaceX's Starlink V2 mini optimized satellites. These are described as the optimized version of the Starlink satellites because they are considerably lighter and have some additional performance that was introduced since SpaceX began launching this version of its spacecraft. There's more than 10,000 Starlink satellites currently in low Earth orbit, and the majority of those are designed to bring internet services to residents in countries around the world. In fact, got a coverage map that we can show you from as recently as the end of March. The darker shaded blue areas are where Starlink service is currently available. And as of the ending of the month of March, as you can see in the bottom middle of the screen, SpaceX had a little more than 10 million customers. Now, Starlink is like internet you can receive in other forms, traditionally and terrestrially. The difference is that it is brought to you by satellite. And so there are a number of ways that you can get that received to your device. SpaceX sells its own user terminals, which are typically large, white, relatively flat pieces of hardware, and you set them up with a view towards the sky, and as long as it's not obstructed, it can provide you with internet that, you know, will vary depending on conditions and where you are in the world and what the coverage looks like. But broadly speaking, it's designed to replicate the same type of internet that you would get from a regular provider like, say, AT&T or Google or Verizon. SpaceX also, within its Starlink constellation, has a number of satellites that are dedicated to what it calls direct-to-cell, or some folks in the industry call it direct-to-device. It's essentially designed to do a similar function to bring you cellular connectivity or make sure that your cell phone has access to the internet from virtually any place on Earth that has a view of the sky. Now, as SpaceX begins to launch its Starship rocket into low Earth orbit and be able to deploy its satellites there, they'll be flying these larger versions of Starlink, which are referred to as V3, or for the direct-to-cell, those will be the version 2 direct-to-cell satellites. These are expected to start launching sometime in the back half of 2026, adding significantly more coverage and capability to the constellation and improving connectivity for folks around the world. SpaceX's Starlink constellation is not the only one in low Earth orbit that is aiming to offer services like this. Of course, you've got one of the newer players, AST Space Mobile, which is also designed to bring internet connectivity to unaltered cellular devices. That customer service, though, is not expected to begin now until likely 2027 because of the unfortunate issue with Blue Origin's New Glenn rocket and their inability to fly right now. Another player that is working towards its broad customer rollout is Amazon with its Amazon Leo service. Like AST Space Mobile, Amazon also bought a number of launches using the New Glenn rocket, but they have a few dozen launches scheduled to fly on United Launch Alliance's Vulcan rockets, and still has one more Atlas V launch that is set to fly coming up this July. That'll be the 8th and final batch of production satellites launched on an Atlas V rocket. And just to make sure I hit the last question from Theo before we get to the big vent, yes, the rocket is going to do the cool landing if all goes well. About 8 minutes and change after liftoff, the booster is set to touch down on a drone ship, which SpaceX calls a shortfall of gravitas. Thanks for the questions, Theo, and thanks for watching. And while the wind direction is not doing us any favors from a visual standpoint, we are starting to see the big vent going right into the launch tower there. You can start to see that venting drifting off to the side there as some birds fly in front of our cameras. This big vent will last about 4 minutes in duration, and will set the stage for liquid oxygen to flow onto the second stage of the Falcon 9, coming up at around T-minus 16 minutes. just about 15 seconds or so remaining on the big vent here, and SpaceX will pivot to loading liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage. Taking a look at our chat here this morning, I want to thank the more than 1,600 of you who are watching along with us live today. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing this stream. Allows more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. I also want to welcome in new channel member Carlita Games, joining us with membership at the Pad Leader level. Welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. Also thanks to K2 Hat for a $5 super chat, who says, good morning. Thanks again for the coverage. Really appreciated all the hard work from the photographers and the mods. Of course, you, Mr. Will. Mr. Will was my uncle's name. You can just call me Will. But thank you, K2. No need to stand on formalities here at Spaceflight now. Time currently T-minus 15 minutes, 12 seconds and counting. Continues to be quite a stunning sunrise here as the early morning light paints the sky above Florida's Space Coast. And if all continues to go well, in the next 15 minutes, we should see Falcon 9 streak across that sky, heading off on a northeasterly trajectory. In the next several minutes as well, we should be getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket, courtesy of SpaceX, along with some pad mic audio and mission control audio, most importantly. Also, if you haven't already, and just seeing the comment from Nell7958, says, liked and subscribed, love the channel, we'll be coming here for all launches, which is very kind of you. If you haven't already, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the bell icon so that you are notified when we do start these live streams and, of course, when we post other videos here to the channel. Currently sitting at 475,000 subscribers and change. Love to see us crest that 500,000 mark before the end of the summer, and you can help us get there. We certainly appreciate all of you who have become channel subscribers, and a special thank you to all of our channel members who provide ongoing support for our coverage here at Spaceflight Now, both in a live and in a recorded editorial fashion. Thank you. Time now T minus 11 minutes, 7 seconds, and counting. Today's launch of a batch of 29 Starlink satellites will be their 52nd dedicated flight of the year so far. This will bring SpaceX up to 1,390 Starlink satellites launched in 2026. In total, right now, they have more than 10,500 Starlink satellites in low Earth orbit. According to a friend of the channel, astronomer and expert orbital tracker, Dr. Jonathan McDowell, there are currently 10,529 Starlink satellites in low Earth orbit as we speak. It's including the batch of 24 that were launched just yesterday morning from Vandenberg Space Force Base. In an effort to safely navigate all of its Starlink satellites in its growing constellation, and obviously plans to add many more in the days, months, years to come, especially when the advent of Starship in an orbital configuration happens. SpaceX developed a situational awareness system that they call Stargaze and produced this graphical video to describe how they maneuver their Starlink satellites using things like star scanners or star trackers. SpaceX also communicates its orbital positions of its various satellites to other operators around the world as a way to help avoid unnecessary potential close encounters with other satellites or potentially foreign objects. SpaceX will also maneuver its satellites in order to avoid a potential conjunction. Can make slight adjustments using the Argon Hall effect thrusters on board the given Starlink satellites and reorient the vehicle into a flatter configuration to make it less likely to impact with another object. Now, got just about 8 minutes remaining on the clock. Now getting pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket courtesy of SpaceX. While SpaceX is currently in an advertisement for its Starlink internet service, let's go ahead and talk about the flight path for the Falcon 9 rocket. As right now in the timeline, SpaceX is currently running some liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps to thermally condition the Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon 9 first stage, protect them from thermal shock and damage at startup. Falcon 9 this morning will be flying on a northeasterly trajectory along the east coast of the United States. The first stage booster following stage separation will target a landing on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. SpaceX earlier in the year retired its other East Coast-based drone ship called Just Read the Instructions and shifted it over to aid in support of the Starship program. The two halves of the payload fairing will also be recovered on this mission. Following atmospheric reentry, they will make a splashdown in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Once down in the water, they'll be brought aboard a SpaceX recovery vessel like the one you see here on your screen, brought through Port Canaveral, then onto Hangar X at the Kennedy Space Center, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future missions. Speaking of those fairing halves, you can see them here on your screen and a view over at Landing Zone 40.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressing for the start of Stromback retract.
Momentarily, we'll see the clamp arms beneath those payload fairing halves open up, and then the large truss structure, the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strongback, that will recline a couple of degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket.
Stromback lower has started.
In this view of the Falcon 9, as you see the clamp arms opening up, you can also see just beyond the fairing, just to the right, the newest vertical integration facility for United Launch Alliance that is termed VIF-A, since it was refurbished to support a two-track system at Space Launch Complex 41 to allow for simultaneous stacking of two rockets there at Slick 41. Currently, Vulcan rocket is being integrated ahead of a static fire, or excuse me, a wet dress rehearsal at Slick 41 coming up in the months ahead of us, as ULA is going to be flying what it calls its LEO optimized Centaur upper stage for the first time on the first launch of a batch of Amazon LEO satellites using Vulcan.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
With that call on Stage 1 liquid oxygen load, we should hear a similar call on the second stage LOX tank at around the 2-minute mark.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
With that, the Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Momentarily, we should see some additional venting as SpaceX releases the remaining liquid oxygen from the feed lines. See that vent beginning now, called ground gas closeouts.
Ground gas closeouts.
Good call there. Coming up to the final minute of the count before liftoff of this SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from Pad 40.
Falcon 9 has entered startup.
And now we're just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to confirm that they are in fact go for launch.
LD, go for launch.
And with that good confirmation, we're just a little more than 30 seconds away now from the liftoff of this Falcon 9. "15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 on the Starlink 10-43 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Max Q.
Falcon 9 passing through max Q, throttling back up on the 9 Merlin 1D engines. A beautiful launch so far, about a minute and a half into this flight. Coming up next will be MVAC chill. The
MVAC chill has started.
There we go. The thermal conditioning of that Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage. SpaceX is coming up to a few events now in quick succession. We will see first stage main engine cutoff or MECO at about T plus 2 minutes and 26 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation and then the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. The fairing halves will separate at around the 3-minute mark in flight. We're less than 20 seconds to MECO now. There you see MECO.
Main
Stage
engine
separation.
cutoff.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC startup.
Good calls, good visuals from the SpaceX onboard cameras. Good
Fairing
views
separation confirmed.
from the ground as well. Call for fairing separation. You can see those fairing halves every now and again glinting against the morning sun. And the two fairing halves will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the booster is set to land on the drone ship, called a shortfall gravitas. We're approaching 4 minutes into the mission. Coming up next will be the 3-engine entry burn as the Falcon 9 first stage makes its way towards the drone ship. It'll begin to slow itself down. You can actually see the booster there on the bottom right of the big box. Maybe slipping into some cloud now, so a little hard to continue to track, but we'll keep an eye out for it. Those pulses that you're seeing there are the cold gas thrusters on the left-hand side of the screen. Those help SpaceX adjust the attitude or the positioning of the booster to make sure it's in the right orientation before it starts that entry burn. Now, a little more than 5 minutes into flight, we're just about a minute away from the start of the 3-engine entry burn. That'll last less than 30 seconds in duration. The upcoming entry burn should shave about 2,000 kilometers per hour off of the velocity there.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Good conclusion of the entry burn. A reduction about 2,400 kilometers per hour in speed. Booster now approaching 30 kilometers in altitude and decreasing as it makes its way towards the drone ship, called a shortfall of gravitas. If successful, this will be the 153rd landing on this particular drone ship and the 511th drone ship landing for SpaceX to date. A little more than 7 minutes into the flight. Coming up next will be the single-engine landing burn, which should take booster 1090 down for that soft landing.
Stage 1 transonic.
1090 now traveling below the speed of sound. Less than 30 seconds to the start of the landing burn.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
Stage 2 FTS has saved.
And a good landing for the 12th time for booster 1090.
MVAC shutdown.
no audible confirmation of a good orbit achieved, but assuming that it did happen and we just did not hear the call out for it, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 will now coast until T plus 51 minutes, 21 seconds post liftoff. There will be a quick 1-second burn to help circularize the orbit of the upper stage, and then the Starlink satellites, all 29 of them, will be released in one go at T plus 1 hour and 43 seconds. Looking back on the plume as the sun rising across the sky here on the horizon of the Space Coast here in Florida, a good mission well underway, about 10 minutes into the flight, and another 29 broadband internet satellites on their way to orbit for SpaceX. Going to come up to our mission stats next as we work on launch replays behind the scenes. Before we get to either of those, though, do want to thank a couple of folks in the live chat real quick. First off, welcome into our newest channel member, Sherfy Lynn. Hopefully I got somewhat close to pronouncing that right. But thanks for joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Also, thanks to K2 Hat for a $5 super chat, who, making this remark before liftoff, said, much less clouds here in Mico, Florida, about 50 miles south of Cape Kennedy or Cape Canaveral. Should be good vibes here, or maybe good skies here. Not sure. Thanks for the commentary, Will. Thank you for your support. Coming now to our mission stats that currently stand. Again, we've got launch replays in work, so be sure to stick around to see all of the angles from which we captured this launch. This was the 12th flight of Falcon 9 first stage booster 1090 in the SpaceX fleet. This marked the company's 646th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 64th of the year so far. Also, the 65th orbital launch for SpaceX in 2026, including one Falcon Heavy launch. And we now know the next flight of a Falcon Heavy is coming just a little bit sooner than previously advertised. Of course, the Nancy Grace Roman Space Telescope will soon be making its way here to the Kennedy Space Center, and teams at NASA now targeting a launch not in early September, but now no earlier than August 30th. So looking forward to a summer cap-off with a Falcon Heavy rocket lifting off from Launch Complex 39A. Coming back to our stats, though, this was the 581st Falcon booster reflight. That is the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the company's 163rd orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 329th orbital launch for SpaceX from Pad 40. This was the 384th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Here's a look at the Falcon bar chart comparing 26 to years past. Moving on to some recovery stats, this was the 153rd good landing of a booster on the drone ship called a short fall of gravitas. That marked the 511th SpaceX drone ship landing, the 619th SpaceX booster landing, and the 621st overall landing of an orbital class rocket. Finally, with some industry stats, this was the 38th orbital flight from the Sunshine State of Florida, the 73rd orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 80th orbital flight from a U.S. rocket company, and the 128th overall orbital launch around the world. There have been 6 launch failures so far this year. Here's a look at the Cape bar chart, going back to the late 50s, and a look at the pie chart around the world where things currently stand. course, one of the launches from Russia that we're looking forward to will be the MS-29 mission, which will carry a couple of cosmonauts alongside NASA astronaut Anil Menon on his first flight to space. And we've got those replays ready for you now, so we're going to go ahead and bring those in. We start things off with the fixed site press, or the press site fixed view from our Adam Bernstein. Onto the wide view next. Off to the turn basin next. Off to the wide tracker next from Cameron Schwartz. And on to the press site tracker next. That last shot was from John Pisani. And that will go ahead and do it for our coverage of the Starlink 10-43 mission. Weather scrub, a couple of delays, but mission off to the races now, about 23 minutes into flight. SpaceX will confirm a good deployment of the Starlink satellites, barring any anomalies from here to deployment. That'll happen on their social media, and we'll update our website as well. Want to thank our actually, we've got one more super chat that came in from Rita Loy. Appreciate the $10 super chat there, who said another great show this morning. Well, thank you for your support of the broadcast. Really appreciate that. And a thanks to our moderators in the chat who've been helping us out this morning, to Jules, M. Teresa, and looks like Aussie Space Girl joined as well. Good to see you this morning. Thanks as well to channel member Cumulus Granatus, who was in the chat to help answer folks' questions today. Sounds like it was cloudy up in Boston, so not the greatest viewing from there, but hopefully other folks along the East Coast got some decent views of the Falcon 9 as it made its climb uphill. Want to thank our photography team this morning, of course, to Cameron Schwartz, Michael Kane, John Pisani, and Adam Bernstein, to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from. We certainly appreciate your time and attention and look forward to welcoming you back in here when next we have a launch to cover. As things currently stand, Again, we're looking at a launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base on Saturday evening. A window that opens up at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10 p.m. Eastern, 0200 UTC for those around the world. And that mission, interestingly enough, which we believe is the first time that they've done this, SpaceX making a public mention that in addition to launching 21 Starlink satellites, that they will be launching 2 Starshield satellites, the government variant of its Starlink satellites. So worth noting that, again, this is the first time we believe that SpaceX has publicly announced the launch of Starshield satellites and name-checked them in their launch description. So we'll wait to see if there's any more information forthcoming either during their broadcast or in the lead-up to it as far as who these Starshield satellites may be serving, whether it is for the U.S. government or for another allied government for the U.S. That said, we look forward to seeing you on Saturday. And for all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks. Until then, bye-bye.